Warning. This program is a true account of real events and contains unsettling material. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, developing this morning, Donna Adelson found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of an FSU professor.
And this ends the trial that has lasted for more than 2 weeks. Andrew in the newsroom with the details.
Donna Adelson was convicted on all counts for that 2013 murder of Dan Markel in Tallahassee. The prosecution believed that she was working with her son to hire 2 hitmen to kill Markel.
July 18, 2014, Tallahassee, Florida. Florida State University law professor Daniel Dan Markel pulled into his garage just before 11 a.m., having dropped off his 2 young sons at daycare earlier that morning. As he sat in his car, someone approached and shot him at close range through the window. He was rushed to the hospital with catastrophic injuries and died the next day at age 41. Markel was a respected legal scholar, a professor of criminal law, and a beloved figure among students and colleagues at Florida State University's law school. He had built a distinguished academic record and was widely known in legal circles. Just months earlier, Markel and his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson, had been embroiled in a bitter custody dispute over their 2 sons, born in 2009 and 2010. After separating in 2012 and finalizing their divorce in 2013, the conflict over where the children should live grew intense. Prosecutors later argued that this custody battle and Markel's refusal to allow their relocation to South Florida was the primary motivation for the killing. Wendy had wanted to move with the boys to South Florida to be closer to her extended family. A judge denied her request to relocate them, instead ordering a shared custody arrangement requiring both parents to remain actively involved in their sons' lives. But resentment lingered. Court filings and emails introduced at later trials showed ongoing disputes over parenting time and other custody issues after the relocation ruling. Some of these communications would become evidence in the murder conspiracy cases years later. From the very beginning, investigators concluded that Markel's death was not a random act of violence or a burglary gone wrong. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables missing, and his personal effects were left untouched at the scene. The attack was clearly targeted. Surveillance footage captured a light-colored Toyota Prius on the streets near Markel's neighborhood before and after the shooting. A vehicle seen repeatedly on cameras trailing cars along the route from the gym Markel had visited earlier that morning to his home. Over the next several days, investigators pieced together additional surveillance and bus camera footage showing that same vehicle following Markel's movements earlier that morning. Detectives identified a toll transponder in the Prius windshield, a key detail that led them to search Sun-Pass toll records for Priuses entering the Tallahassee area around the time of the murder. Those records led police to a rental car agency in Miami where a Prius had been rented. The contract listed 2 names, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. Cell tower ping data confirmed that both men's phones were in Tallahassee on the morning of the murder, and that the Prius captured in camera footage was the same car they had rented. Both men had criminal histories. Rivera, in particular, was already serving a federal sentence for racketeering conspiracy as a leader in the Latin Kings street gang when investigators connected him to the Markel killing. Garcia had a felony record too. Investigators determined that Garcia and Rivera had traveled from South Florida to Tallahassee in the days before the murder, checked into a motel the night before, and were repeatedly captured on video following Markel's car the morning of July 18. The combination of surveillance footage, toll records, rental records, and cell phone data convinced detectives that this was a planned and targeted killing, not an opportunistic attack. As the investigation unfolded, phone records and other data showed frequent communication among Garcia, Rivera, and intermediary Catherine Magnabano, a woman later described by prosecutors as a central figure in the murder-for-hire plot. Phone and cell tower records showed communication between Garcia and Magbanua in the days leading up to the murder. Investigators also examined financial ties, noting that Magbanua received payments from the Adelson family, which prosecutors later argued were linked to her role in facilitating the murder plot. Testimony from witnesses and cooperating defendants established key roles: Garcia as the shooter, Rivera as the driver, and Magbanua as an intermediary who coordinated aspects of the plan. Rivera eventually agreed to cooperate with authorities, pleading guilty to second-degree murder in 2016 in exchange for a reduced sentence, a deal that hinged on his testimony about the plot. Rivera told prosecutors that Garcia had asked him to accompany him on the murder of Dan Markel, offering payment for his participation. He explained that Magbanua acted as the link between those involved in the killing, and that the motive was connected to the custody dispute, with the aim of influencing control over the children. Based on this evidence, police arrested Sigfredo Garcia on May 25, 2016, charging him with first-degree murder. Garcia denied involvement in the murder and claimed he had never traveled to Tallahassee, but investigative evidence contradicted his statements. Catherine Magbanua was arrested on October 1, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. Prosecutors reportedly offered her immunity in exchange for testifying against other family members, but she declined. During the investigation, the FBI conducted undercover operations and captured recorded interactions involving members of the Adelson family and others tied to the case. These recordings later became critical evidence in the prosecutions. The trials for Garcia and Magbanua took place in 2019. Prosecutors presented extensive evidence, including phone records, cell tower data, financial documents, and testimony from Rivera, now cooperating with law enforcement. On October 11, 2019, after more than 11 hours of deliberations, the jury found Sigfredo Garcia guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. On October 15th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder charge, plus an additional 30 years for conspiracy. Magbanua's first trial ended in a mistrial after a hung jury. She remained in custody while awaiting retrial. On May 16, 2022, her retrial began, with prosecutors again presenting phone records, financial evidence, and testimony linking her to the plot. On May 27, 2022, the jury found Magbanua guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. On July 29, 2022, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 2 consecutive 30-year sentences for conspiracy and solicitation. But the case against the Adelson family itself was not yet complete. Prosecutors believed key family members were involved in the conspiracy to kill Dan Markel, but building a strong case against them required more evidence. Investigators continued gathering phone records, wiretaps, financial records, and recorded conversations that ultimately helped link the murder-for-hire plot to others connected to the family. Finally, on April 21, 2022, authorities arrested Charles or Charlie Adelson, charging him with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with Markel's killing. Charlie Adelson's trial began on October 26, 2023, the day before his 47th birthday. Prosecutors presented evidence including wiretaps, phone records, financial transactions, and testimony from Magbanua and other witnesses showing Charlie's financial connections to those involved and communications linking him to the plot. Charlie Adelson took the stand in his own defense, denying the charges and claiming that his payments were legitimate and that his conversations were taken out of context. His defense argued much of the case was circumstantial. The jury was unconvinced. On November 6, 2023, after less than 4 hours of deliberation, Charlie Adelson was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and solicitation to commit first-degree murder. On December 12, 2023, he was sentenced to life without parole for the murder, with additional decades for the conspiracy and solicitation convictions. Exactly 1 week later, on November 13, 2023, Donna Adelson was arrested at Miami International Airport while attempting to board a flight to Vietnam, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. Law enforcement charged her with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation in connection with Markel's killing. Donna's trial was originally scheduled for September 2024, but was delayed when her attorney withdrew due to a conflict of interest. Her trial eventually began on August 22, 2025, with prosecutors presenting recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony alleging her involvement in the murder-for-hire conspiracy. Prosecutors portrayed Donna Adelson as a key figure in planning and facilitating the plot, tying her actions to the contentious custody dispute and efforts to influence the outcome of Markel's custody arrangement. Defense attorneys argued that the evidence did not directly prove she planned or funded the murder, but the jury ultimately rejected that view. On September 4, 2025, after a multi-week trial, a jury found Donna Adelson guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation in connection with the killing of Dan Markel. At her sentencing hearing, Donna expressed sorrow for Markel's death and questioned the evidence the state presented against her, asserting she had not been the mastermind the prosecution described. On October 13, 2025, Donna Adelson, then 75 years old, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for her role in the murder-for-hire plot. The judge ordered that her sentence include additional decades for the conspiracy and solicitation charges to be served consecutively. Wendy Adelson testified at her mother's trial under a use immunity agreement, meaning statements she made could not be used against her in criminal proceedings. On the stand, she described her relationship with Markel and the difficulties of their divorce, but denied having any involvement in or knowledge of a plot to kill him. During questioning, Wendy acknowledged making some derogatory remarks about Markel during the divorce, including calling him an STD and Dark Lord, but emphasized she had no role in planning or facilitating his murder. Wendy has never been criminally charged in connection with the murder plot and has maintained that she had no involvement or knowledge of the conspiracy. The aftermath. Dan Markel's murder began with a bitter custody battle and ended in a deadly, calculated plot. Investigators spent over a decade piecing together the evidence. Phone records, financial trails, surveillance footage, and witness testimony revealed a chilling murder-for-hire scheme. By late 2025, 5 people were convicted: Hitmen Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, intermediary Catherine Magbanua, and members of the Adelson family, Charlie and Donna. Justice was served, but at an unimaginable cost. Markel's ex-wife, Wendy Adelson, testified under immunity, denying any involvement. Yet no courtroom could undo the loss of a devoted father, the trauma to 2 young sons, or the betrayal that tore a family apart. In the end, the consequences of greed, vengeance, and ambition left scars that would never heal. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on every new case.